What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Lab. So our super budget gaming PC has actually been doing quite well. It's really got me into Rocket League. If you haven't played Rocket League, I highly recommend it. It's a great game, it's free from the Epic Store, and it'll pretty much run on any machine. But if you remember from the last video, this machine started to see its limits when we tried to get it to play Call of Duty Warzone. Now Warzone isn't the easiest game to run, particularly the free version, but the one thing it did give us is the ability to see what we needed to upgrade next. So today we're going to be looking at giving it its first major upgrade. So if you remember from the last video, we tried to get it to play Call of Duty Warzone, and although it didn't play very well, if not at all, we managed to get in a couple of games, but that was about it. We did manage to use the metrics to be able to tell us what we needed to upgrade, and it specifically pointed at obviously the CPU, the GPU and the memory. Now when we built this machine, we did build it towards a more lower end kind of game, but now we feel it's something that we want to actually push further on. Now ideally what we'd want to do is we'd want to change the CPU and add a discrete graphics card, but due to the problems at the moment obtaining graphics cards and particularly their prices, we're not going to be able to do that on a budget. And for this upgrade we've decided to give ourselves a budget of £100. The other option we've got is actually going for another APU, something like this. This is the Ryzen 5 2400G. It's one of the first generation Ryzen APUs from AMD. It has 4 cores, 8 threads and a base clock speed of 3.6 GHz. Compared to the A series we've got running in this machine, it's actually a different world altogether. The architecture just makes it a far superior processor. Being one of the first generations, there are other ones that you can actually get. We managed to pick this up for £100. We could have picked up a Ryzen 5 3200G for the same price, but we decided to go with the 5 because we wanted those extra threads for other activities. Now to change the CPU in this, we need a couple of tools. First is a screwdriver, and that's because of the AMD Wraith Stealth cooler that we're using uses screws to the backplate, and we'll need some more thermal paste. I like to use the Arctic MX4, but you can use whichever brand you prefer, and you can pick it up pretty cheap on eBay or Amazon. Fortunately for us as well, with this processor, we can actually continue to use the AMD Ryzen Stealth cooler, and that's because this processor is also a 65 watts, which that cooler will actually go up to. So all we need to do now is get that swapped and see how much of an improvement we've made. To change the CPU, we need to first remove the cooler. We're going to do this by first unplugging it, and then we have to undo each screw in each corner a little bit at a time. It's best to alternate on the corners because then we have an equal pressure all the time on the processor. Now if you're doing this inside your case, you've got to make sure that you've got the back ready to be taken off, because the back plate will actually drop into the case, and we'll need to raise that up so that we can put the cooler back on. Now before we remove the cooler, it's always best to heat your system up first so that the actual compound isn't as sticky, and then we just give it a little twist and a little pull and it should come off. Just like that. Now when I bought my thermal paste, I actually bought it in a kit, and the kit came with some thermal surface purifier and some thermal material remover. Now I like to use this stuff because it's nice and clean to be able to clean up the job that you're doing. It's not necessary, you can just use normal towel. All you do is just put a couple of drops onto the processor and the cooler. Take a little bit of towel and clean it up. Now we can remove this CPU by lifting the arm and just taking it out. Taking the new CPU and lining it up to the correct location, we just drop it into the socket and we return the arm back down. Now we need to reapply the thermal paste. There is many different ways of doing this, and lots of people will give you lots of different tips. I generally tend to just put a bead in the middle and then let the pressure of the fan and the cooler actually squish it out. But sometimes when you buy the kits, you also get these little spatulas. Now, to be double safe, you can actually use this to spread the thermal paste all over so it's nice and even. Now that we've got the thermal paste in place, I'm going to remove the back, lift up the chassis and put the metal plate, backing plate, back through the motherboard, and then I will rest it on top of something. I'll put that just underneath it so it lifts it up. Just like that. Now we can reinstall the fan. The fan, we just line up each corner into one of the screws and then we start to screw it down. Again, you doing each corner individually, a little bit at a time, so that we get equal pressure across the fan. Now the Wraith Stealth, which is what this cooler is, will actually bottom out when the screws get far enough in, so you can't over tighten this. You've just got to make sure each corner locks down. And we're ready to go. Now all we need to do is just replug the fan back in. Took the cable away so it can't touch any of the case fans. I took it just under there. And we're ready to test. Now that we've changed the CPU, what we need to do is give it a bit of a test. When you first boot the system up, it's going to give you a bit of an error on the BIOS screen, and it's going to ask you to press F1 to get into the BIOS so it can do some configuration. Hit that button and let it do what it needs to do, and then just save and exit from the BIOS. And don't forget that when you get into Windows, you'll need to get the latest drivers for this APU from AMD. So now all we need to do is give it a test. It's not a game, it's a rich thing. So as you can see from the benchmarks, we've greatly improved the performance of this machine. On all games, on pretty much all settings, we've seen a dramatic increase in the frames per second that we can do. Now we've been running these on the standard presets for each game and at 1080p. If you were to lower that and do a bit of customization, you can actually get a little bit more out of it, and particularly those games that you can start using things like the Vulkan APIs, which will actually help. When we were doing our testing, we tried to actually test Call of Duty Warzone again, but the game was just too unstable on this machine for us to actually get anything significant out of it. We did manage to get into a few of the training missions and the performance did increase, but trying to get into an online game, it was just full of crashes and things like that. I don't know if that's really the game or not, but I haven't had much luck with that game on any other system either. So what we did is we replaced that game with World War Z. It's a reasonably modern game and it will really push this system to its limits in testing it in different settings. I actually like using that game because it's got a built-in benchmarking tool which will greatly help us with testing going forward. And as you can see, it runs it really well. So for £100 we've managed to increase the performance of our machine, which has actually opened up to the amount of games that we can now play. But we're not going to leave it here, we're going to take it further. I think next we're going to start looking at what kind of memory upgrade we should be getting for this machine. These APUs, particularly the Ryzen ones, do like fast memory and they like quite a bit of it, and that's because the iGPU inside is also using the system memory instead of where if you had a discrete graphics card it would have its own. So while we're out there having a look for memory to see what we can get on a budget for this machine, we're going to keep playing the games that we've got and we're going to tweak and test the settings to see if we can customize it to actually get a little bit more out of it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see the upgrades coming further, and we're going to rebench all the same games again, so we'll see how much of an increase we make. And make sure you drop this video a like, and I'll see you again next time.